So now we've gone over each endocrine gland, what the glands release, all the hormones, what hormones are, that they cause certain effects in the body, that our body releases a shit ton of hormones. They circulate the body, searching for certain cells to act on, that cause an effect. So now we're going to go over the two main types of hormones and the main types of the structure of how they're shaped. And depending on what kind of structure they are, that depends on how they act on their cell. Now there's more types, but these are the two main important ones. The first one is a majority of the hormones. Majority of the hormones are peptide hormones. This is just a classification of them. And proteins are made of peptides, if you remember from Bio 101 or whatever. And peptides are made of amino acids. So peptide hormones and amino acid hormones, or amino acid base hormones, mean the same exact thing. It's just a different way to say the same thing. And this is a majority of hormones, just like there's two types. It's just a type of a hormone. It comes in a certain flavor or whatever. And if you also remember, amino acids are charged, so they have a negative charge. And what this means, since they're charged, is they can't cross the cell membrane. Because the cell membrane, the purpose of the membrane is to keep out certain things from the cell. So it keeps out certain things from the cell. And these amino acids have a charge, so they can't cross the cell membrane. So when they find a cell, they have to have a way to affect it if they can't cross the membrane. So here's a cell, kind of. And here's the membrane, here's the hormone. We'll draw the hormone as six-sided or whatever, or five. It's not always like, hormones don't always look like that, but essentially what it has to do is it has to go into the cell, act on the nucleus, and cause a certain effect. Well, it can't do that because it's charged. So it has to have a way to cause this effect, but it can't go inside the cell. So thus, there's receptors on the cell, and the hormone acts on the receptor. And what these receptors are is this answers the question to when the body releases a hormone, how the hell does that hormone know, or what cell does that hormone know to bind to, and how does it know to cause what effect? Because when your body releases hormones, it releases thousands of hormones. These hormones don't know what they're doing. They're just hormones. They're not smart enough to know exactly, oh, I have to raise blood pressure, or I have to lower calcium balance. They don't know that. They're just released. And the body has receptors either on the cell or in the cell. And the hormones recognize these receptors. They're specific to this specific receptor, only that receptor. So this hormone searches throughout the body until it finds that receptor. When it finds that receptor, it binds to it. In the case of peptide amino acid-based hormone, the receptor is on the cell. So it binds to this receptor. And now the nucleus is inside the cell, so it has to act on the nucleus. So it binds to this receptor. And what it does is there's a little guy sitting on top of the receptor. So when the cell binds to the receptor, it tells another cell something else and tells something else, and that finally acts on the cell. So it's kind of like it's a second messenger system. That's what it's called, and we'll go over more details that what the exact cells are, or what the exact second messenger is when it binds to it. And essentially, it binds to the receptor, tells this guy that, oh, hey, the receptor binded, or the hormone binded, the hormone's there, and then it goes acts on this guy. This guy tells this guy finally tells the nucleus, or makes something that can tell the nucleus. So that's amino acid-based hormone. It can't cross the cell membrane. And this is a majority of the hormones. But before we go over the exact hormones that are amino acid-based, let's go over steroid hormones, because there's only like 5 steroid hormones in the body, so that means that everything else must be a peptide hormone. So we'll erase that. Now, the other class of hormones are steroid hormones. Now, when I think of steroids, I still think of athletes taking steroids or whatever, or douchebags in the gym taking steroids to get muscles and not knowing exactly what the hell they're doing. But it turns out a lot of things in the body depend on steroids, and a lot of hormones, a lot of important things in the body like estrogen, progesterone, estrogen, all that, testosterone, everything like that, all that stuff is steroids. And our body makes those every single day. So technically everyone in our body has steroids in our body. So technically everyone takes steroids. They don't. So saying someone takes steroids is stupid. Well, I'm not really stupid, but just saying what it is. So everyone has steroids in the body. Okay, so steroids, unlike peptide hormones, these can cross the cell membrane because they're made of fat. They're made of a fat called cholesterol. All steroid hormones are made from cholesterol. So this is another reason why cholesterol is very important in the body. It makes testosterone, it makes progesterone, it makes cortisol, aldosterone. It's very important in the body. It's just when you have too much cholesterol, that's when you have bad things happen. But these can cross the cell membrane, unlike peptide hormones. So steroid hormones can cross the cell membrane. So again, draw in our cell, our little box hormone. Now it can easily cross the membrane, act on the receptor, act on the nucleus. So the receptor is actually in the cell. So the receptor is still in there, but it's in the cell. Now what this does is, or actually what all hormones do, when they act on the receptor, they cause a change in transcription, and transcription, of course, is making of an mRNA to make a protein. And it causes translation, and it makes the creation of a new protein. Or it increases the permeability of a cell so more things can go into the cell or leave a cell. So that's how a majority of hormones act. They change the permeability of cells, or they change this transcription and translation and make the creation of a new protein. So that's how pretty much every hormone works. So steroid hormones can cross into the cell. And now we'll name the steroid hormones. Since when you know the steroid hormones, you can easily know all the peptide hormones. The steroid hormones are cortisol. Now cortisol is the stress hormone in our body. Whenever we're stressed, we release cortisol. In going back thousands of years, whenever people used to be stressed, it was usually because they were about to die or their body needed a lot of energy, so they released cortisol. And what cortisol does is it solves the problem of not having enough energy. It increases the metabolism of glucose in the, that's the word I'm looking for. It increases the metabolism of glucose, so you make more energy. Nowadays, when people are stressed, it's not because they're dying. Mostly it's because they're stressed out and whatnot, so still increase the metabolism of energy. So another hormone is aldosterone. Now, cortisol and aldosterone are both released from the cortex of the adrenal glands. Now, aldosterone, what it does is it increases fluid balance in the body. So what this is it increases fluid balance, whereas fluid balance increases blood pressure. So say we have very low blood pressure, we're peeing out too much water, or our blood pressure is very low. So what we do is we release aldosterone, going through several steps before, cascades and everything, but it releases aldosterone. Aldosterone acts on the kidneys. It increases the absorption of sodium. So it increases sodium absorption. So it increases the absorption of sodium from the kidneys, so you don't pee out sodium. And from osmosis, going back on the first test, what we learned from osmosis, sodium is highly, when you have more sodium in the bloodstream, that means your bloodstream is more concentrated. So water follows high concentration, so water will also be absorbed with sodium. And when you absorb water, your blood pressure raises and you're happy. So you raise your blood pressure that way. So cortisol and aldosterone are both steroid hormones. Now the other steroid hormones are easy to know, kind of. They all end with O-N-E. You have progesterone. Now progesterone we didn't really talk about, but this is released from the ovaries. So it's released from the ovaries, and it's a steroid hormone, and this is what maintains pregnancy in women and ovulation and all that stuff. So you have progesterone, of course testosterone, everyone knows testosterone. So progesterone and testosterone are really the main sex hormones. Of course, these are released directly from the gonads in response to FSH and LH. So you release progesterone and testosterone, and these are the main sex hormones. And these are all steroid hormones, so that just means everything else must be peptide hormone. But there's also another class of hormones. They're called tyrosine derivatives. It's just a very small class. Now tyrosine is, don't know how to spell derivative, so it's going to be spelled wrong. So tyrosine is an amino acid also, but unlike amino acid-based hormones where they're made of many amino acids, because of peptides, tyrosine hormones are only made of, just tyrosine. Now tyrosine hormones are thyroid hormone. So it's a very small types of hormone. It's like an exception. Thyroid hormone isn't steroid or peptide, it's a tyrosine hormone. Also epinephrine. Epinephrine is also a tyrosine derivative. So thyroid hormone and epinephrine. Now, Unlike different than steroid hormones and peptide hormones, where either the receptor is outside the cell in the case of peptide hormones, or the receptor is inside the cell in case of steroid hormones. For tyrosine derivatives, it depends on the actual hormone whether the receptor is inside the cell or outside the cell. Now, for thyroid gland, the receptor is inside the cell. So the receptor is inside. So it just goes inside the cell just like a steroid hormone. Now for epinephrine, receptor is outside the cell. So like a peptide hormone, it acts on the receptor outside the cell. So that's just a very small class, thyroid hormone and epinephrine. So going over a very, very brief overview, tyrosine derivatives is thyroid and epinephrine. Steroid hormones are the cortisol, aldosterone, progesterone, testosterone. It's really all the ONEs. And everything else is peptide hormone. So follicle stimulating, luteinizing, growth hormone, adrenocorticotrophin hormone, all that stuff are peptide hormones. Now this is a lot of stuff to memorize. The three classes, peptide, steroid, and tyrosine derivatives, which ones belong to what class. It's a lot of things to memorize, but unfortunately in the endocrine system, you have to memorize them. But it's pretty cool when you think about how the structure affects how these cells act on, certain cells, and these structures determine everything that we do. And of course, everything we think and everything we feel is because of hormones. Whether we're hungry, we're afraid of something, or we need to urinate, or whether you're pushing out babies, whatever, uterine contractions, everything. Everything is determined by hormones. So it's pretty interesting to know what is causing all these effects and understanding how, when you're scared, what is happening in my body right now? You're releasing a lot of epinephrine, adrenaline, everything. Or when I'm hungry, what is my body doing right now? Or when I need to pee, or I have high blood pressure. So it's really cool to understand all these things. So these are the three classes of hormones. And we pretty much went over how they act on cells, on the receptors. So next we'll talk about the feedback, how our body actually controls how much hormones we release and when we use these hormones.